Oh, and thank you, gentlemen, for giving us a few minutes to collect our wits and our breath again. And we will do intros around the table. And we have a guest in our council chamber today, which is so nice. He is somebody contemplating running for council. So he's here checking us out, I guess, checking out the job. So that's pretty cool. So we'll start with his name and move around the table and end up with you folks. That's the Rolling Hills area, so that would be bordering you guys. Okay, Lionel.
Lionel Justin, I'm from the center of the county, north and east of Brooks. Brian DeJong, Div 8, which is around the village of Dutchess. And he already has his nomination papers in, so there's not contemplating anymore. So.
Anne-Marie Phillipson, Division 3, Patricia Millicent area.
Clarence Amulin, and I'm just looking forward to him taking my place.
Matt Fensky, County Administrator, welcome.
Wayne Hammergan, Division 4, which is Scandia, Rainier, and Bow City.
Good afternoon. Huey Kellum, Division 2 in the Tilly area.
Well, thank you, Council, and Reeve Douglas, appreciate the opportunity to be here. My name is Paul Carolan, CEO for Halo Air Ambulance. I work full-time for the program and have the opportunity to meet with politicians and councils from across Southern Alberta and along with the provincial government to work with where Halo stands and what the future looks like. Today, we're going to take you through a short presentation. We try to keep these things sort of short and sweet and focus mostly on questions and answers. But we will give you a little bit of a history on who we are and where we started and where we think the program is going. And our chair, Dale Thacker, is with us, so I'll let him introduce himself as well.
Yeah, Dale Thacker, like you said, I'm going to be in your division. I'm Division 1. I'm a ratepayer down on the other side of 12 Mile Lake. Been on the Halo board, well, since its inception back in 2007. I was on in 2006 and was involved with range on helicopters before that. So this has been a goal of mine for a long time. I think it's something that we do very, very well, and we're very, very cost effective. So we're really proud to be involved with, or I'm proud to be involved with the Halo program. So turn back to Paul. And I made a big boo-boo and forgot we have 3 people online today who you didn't meet. Well, they're up here and over there, and so Kelly, thanks for reminding me. Go ahead, Kelly.
Hi, I'm Kelly Chrisman. I'm from the west side of the county.
Hello, I'm Ellen Unruh, and I am representing the Division 7 around the village of Rosemary.
Hi there, my name is Tracy Fife, and I represent Division 5, which is south and west around the city of Brooks.
Thank you, ladies, and I am sorry that I neglected to include you in the intros. This is getting to be a bigger job all the time here. All right, go ahead, Dale, sorry.
Thank you, Reeve Douglas. So just a little bit of background here for you, just about the overall program. So first and foremost, one of the things that we always want to represent very clearly is Halo is governed by an extremely dedicated and highly passionate volunteer board of directors. And we talk a lot about volunteer work in grassroots organizations, and we have a lot of that in Alberta. A lot of really good and important things have come up from a grassroots perspective. And I think we all appreciate how much volunteers do for us. But I want to really focus on briefly that our volunteer board of directors not only volunteer their time, commitment, energy, and brain power, but many of them also spend money out of their own pocket. So I know Dale is currently, and he won't really appreciate this very much, but I know Dale is currently in the middle of some fairly complicated harvests to make sure that he gets his product off the land and does as much as he can with the drought conditions that we're in. And he'll be here today while he's probably paying out of pocket to have someone else do the job that he would be doing if he was back home on his farmstead. That's not the first time that has happened. We've had other board members who have paid to seed crops, spray crops, and harvest crops so they can attend meetings with me when I go to Edmonton or come to places like this and have those kinds of things. So I know Dale has about twice the amount of kilometers on his truck he would have if he was not a HALO chairperson. And so there is an additional commitment from our board that far exceeds just the dedication that they have to the organization. We're extremely efficient. Dale sort of alluded to that in his opening remarks. So over 90% of every dollar raised, including the money that the County of Newell contributes, goes to operating the helicopter. And we think that's really important, not only to achieve that, but to make sure that we tell you that as well. We keep our administrative program delivery costs as inexpensive as we possibly can. I represent almost 1/2 of our entire full-time team. We have about 2.5 people. So we have another person back at the office, and we have a sort of a 0.6, 0.75 financial administrator that helps us with the accounting side, which is ever so more complicated in life in nonprofits and Revenue Canada and things like that. So having someone that can do that well is really important. And then on top of that, we try to keep our fundraising costs as well as low as possible. So we are still an organization that recognizes that under some regulations you have to give away a certain amount of what you raise in lotteries and things like that, which can affect those numbers. But otherwise we're out there pounding the pavement, asking for donations, looking for support, so that we're not paying out of pocket to raise the money that keeps the helicopter flying. We do receive almost no support from the provincial government and no predictable or stable funding from the provincial government. We receive a fee for service. So on authorized Alberta Health Service missions, we are able to recuperate some expense, but last year it represented less than 6% of our entire operating budget. HALO provides primarily support, and the inspiration was around medevac or air ambulance work. But we have learned over the years that we have extremely highly skilled people outside of that, pilots and search and rescue personnel and other people that have the ability to contribute to the program to help in situations that are likely going to result in a medevac anyway. So we also provide law enforcement support. We work with RCMP, the Medicine Hat City Police. We're just in conversations in the last few weeks with the Lethbridge Emergency Services about supporting them in the town of Lethbridge. We provide fire department support. We have launched the helicopter for aerial recon work in major wildfires, grass fires, and things like that. And we're available for disaster emergency response. So whether that's a tornado, a plow wind, a wildfire, or something like that, where we can come out and help you position resources, move resources, and offer that bird's eye view, as it were, about what's happening on the ground. We also offer extensive search and rescue abilities. We were on a couple of high-profile search and rescue calls recently, one in Cypress Hills when a 6-year-old girl was missing over at night. And actually, the one right before that was right here in the county of Newell and in the town of Brooks, where a young lady had wandered away, and we had to help search for her. So that was actually one of our most shared and engaged posts on social media in the last 12 months, was the search for that young lady in this area. So we're very active in those kinds of things and have abilities that you can't accomplish from the ground, including being able to look into bodies of water and see if someone maybe has been in the water or gotten out of the water, and the helicopter really drives that point home very well. And then finally, we still think it's extremely important that people understand who we are. And a big part of that is the helicopter. And so we still budget and plan for taking the helicopter to community events and providing training for regional firefighters, including how to work around the helicopter safely and set up landing zones for us that we know will work in those cases. We have a dedicated operational module, so I'm going to cover a couple of things that will address some mistakes or incorrect information in the recent provincial HEMS review. This was one of the ones that was said about HALO was we're not dedicated. That is absolutely not true, and we have corrected Alberta Health on that. We only respond to emergency services. We do not do any pipeline work or forestry work or power line work. The helicopter is in the hangar and waiting to respond to an emergency call 14 hours a day. We're not currently flying at night, but the night program is under development. And then, as you can appreciate, flying aircraft with Transport Canada can be challenging to begin with. So adding a night component is another piece that we have to work through, but it is on our radar to get that running as soon as possible. Pilots can fly up to 14 hours a day, and so our pilots are sitting at the hangar for most of that. The captains are generally there for at least 12, and then we have a buffer hour on either side of our 7 to 7 operational window that allows them to respond to an early call or a late call if necessary. This is the most expensive part of a program. This is much like fire department. Having the paid on-call firefighters, the apparatus, the buildings, and all of the pieces that go along with that is what usually costs the most, and Halo is no different. Having the helicopter there dedicated to emergency services formulates the bulk of our annual expense. Admissions represent less than 20% of our costs annually, so the flying part is very inexpensive. So if we can find a model that provides predictable and stable funding to make sure the helicopter is there, getting the money to make sure we're able to fly is very simple. Just some statistics for you so you have a sense of what things have looked like over the last 4 years. 2021 will be year to date when we get to that slide. 2018 was a bit of an anomaly because 2018 was the year that we brought on our new twin-engine helicopter, the BK-117. So 2018 has call volumes representing our original helicopter, which was a single-engine rescue helicopter, and now also part of these statistics include 3 months at the end of the year, October, November, and December of 2018, that included the new helicopter. So in 2018, as you can see, the County of Newell represented 11% of our calls for service. Again, 2019, a little bit higher at 17%. 2020, so just last year in COVID, 10%. I would like to say that I think while the percentage is a good snapshot of the calls for service, we saw a significant decrease in calls for service in 2020 due to the pandemic. People weren't out and about doing things and traveling and doing the things that cause a lot of scene calls or emergency service accidents. And that was true across the board in Alberta. Even ground ambulances were less busy. So the percentage is the percentage. That doesn't change. But the overall calls for service was reduced in 2020. In 2021, we have seen a return to normal as far as increased calls for service. And as we sit today, I just calculated this morning, Newell has about 5% of our annual calls for service as we stand today. We wanted to talk a little bit about where we were last year. I know that Reeve Douglas and perhaps some other councillors were on our presentation right before the pandemic hit. Halo was ultimately and had for many years been a purely event-based organization that fundraised every dollar we made by having people in front of us and telling our story really well. And the pandemic, at the time where our bank account sat and without the ability to predict what the future looked like, we were in a very serious position where we were going to have to roll back services. We presented to regional councils across southern Alberta, and many councils stood up and either supplied their annual funding early or increased their funding to make sure that Halo was able to stay around. I would say that that was extremely successful. Halo fundraised with the assistance of responsible corporate partners, private individuals, and leading municipalities. Our entire operational budget in 2020, we raised just over 2.6 million. And we raised 3 million last year, and we're on track to raise that again this year. So the foundation has proved that we can provide predictable and stable funding to the program. We have a very strong relationship with many of our regional municipalities that are providing stable and predictable funding as well. And the final piece ultimately is the province to come to the table and provide their piece, which then will ultimately make the program stable for many years to come. We believe we can do it without them. We just don't think they should be let off the hook when it comes to that. So Halo is not going anywhere, and I would like to take the opportunity with this slide up to talk a little bit about the HEMS review and some of the things that were mistaken in there so you have a sense of where we come from and what we think is going to happen. So I already talked about dedicated service. The other part in about Halo that was a mistake was, and this one you'll appreciate a lot, Alberta Health used a very highly reputable source to get a piece of information that we had actually bought a second helicopter. So in February of this year, our primary aircraft was scheduled to go off duty for major annual maintenance. And so I flew to Cranbrook to look at another helicopter that we could have brought in to provide the same level of service to the people in southern Alberta while our primary aircraft was off. And one of the people that went with me took a picture of us at that hangar, and they posted it on Twitter. And so Twitter is part of the evidence-based approach that the HEMS review was able to get information from, because we weren't buying a helicopter. In fact, one of Halo's primary filters for philosophy is how are we making sure we do the right thing? And so we were prepared to lease a helicopter on short-term basis to make sure that we could continue to provide the same level of support to counties and councils all across southern Alberta. So that is the one other thing that was incorrect in the About Halo part. And then the last piece is the night part of our program. So Alberta Health has said that we don't fly at night. I guess technically that is true, but we do have the most advanced night vision goggles in the country, and we are just waiting for Transport Canada approval to make sure that we can make that program viable. The reason we haven't pursued it faster, actually, is because Alberta Health currently has told us they won't let their paramedics fly with us at night. So because that's the majority of our missions, we haven't prioritized or rushed to get that program up and running, because it really, in a 14-hour window, only starts to become a factor in the next several months. And so we'll be working towards that over the next several months, regardless of them, to make sure that we can provide coverage as soon as possible when it comes to those operational requirements. So just in the About Halo section of the HEMS review, those were 3 glaring errors that we have raised with Alberta Health and pointed out to them that they had made some mistakes there. With regards to the rest of the HEMS review, the truth is, County of Newell helped us get the HEMS review in the first place. That happened through Rural Municipalities Association as a resolution in 2019. So we are very appreciative of your efforts to make sure that happened. We do think that was valuable. One of the things that we have been saying for years was clearly identified in the HEMS review, which is they needed to provide more funding to helicopters. We did not believe that they would then choose to indicate that they wanted to provide that to one operator, although that is still under review and those conversations continue. I'm here today to reassure you that Halo is not going anywhere. Regardless of what the decision is, ultimately, we have a plan in place to make sure that we can continue to provide medevac and rescue support that is not available otherwise. One of the things that's been very clear lately is we want to make sure that we're representing our program to the people that we serve, and we're not STARS. We're not trying to be STARS. We don't want to be STARS. STARS has an incredible model that works extremely well in the core in Edmonton, Calgary, and Red Deer. Just a quick piece of math for you today. So we use a 4-flight is a flight planning system, and I did a quick calculation while I was waiting in the fronts there. So flight today into a bit of a headwind, it's about 20-25 kilometers an hour. To this building would have been 30 minutes for Halo, and we can still get to Calgary at Foothills at about 50 minutes later. I'm not here to provide the comparison about STARS, but if we can get to Calgary in 50 minutes, that should tell you how long it would take a helicopter coming out of Calgary to get to you here. So you're waiting an additional 20 minutes to get a helicopter, plus you have the same flight time back. So those are important considerations for the area we serve. You guys are completely in our wheelhouse. If you take a ruler from Oyen and put the other end on Waterton, pretty much anything southeast of that line, we are going to be the faster, more responsive resource for you. After that, we start to match up with STARS, and helicopters should stay as close to their base of operations as they can, because it allows us to provide overlap across the entire province. And so we'll continue to have those conversations with Alberta Health. That's our job. However, we are encouraged that the minister did not go ahead with his press conference about the HEMS review, and he reached out to us to tell us that conversation would continue over the coming months. We have had one meeting with Alberta Health since that time, and we suspect to have another one sometime in September. So that is all just to give you a sense of what Halo is accomplishing and where we think the future lies for us. But in 2020, because I think this is an important statistic for you, and I know many people have asked, is after that call to action that we made, we did have a significant increase from regional councils in emergency funding, accelerated funding by paying their normal contribution sooner than they would otherwise, and new funding. So this slide just represents the overall increase based on that call. based on Cypress County's presentation of sort of that per capita approach to regional funding for the helicopter. So those are the statistics for you on that side. And finally, I just want you to know that we're extremely dedicated to Southern Alberta. That's why we exist, and that's why we serve, and we have the ability to serve the entire 13 counties in Southern Alberta that we have responded to in multiple cases, as far west out as Willow Creek, as far south as Cardston and McGrath, as far north as special areas in Oyen and all of those places as well. So we have the ability, by being located regionally, to maximize our fuel volume and our speed. So we take advantage of every ounce of fuel by sweeping towards the subject and then taking them on to that level 1 trauma center if that's what the care is they need in Calgary. And this map in front of me, I hope everybody can see it, but the green oval represents the area in which we can fly from Medicine Hat and land in Calgary without a refuel. The very top of that oval is Red Deer, and the very bottom corner is the town of Waterton. We just can't quite reach Waterton and still make foothills just because of the wind mostly, but generally speaking, we can cover all of Southern Alberta. We also believe that our partnership with Alberta Health is critical. We're taking advantage of paramedics that are already in the system, and while there may be evolutions of that program that change from our current model where we take an on-duty crew from the hospital to a dedicated model where we take a air medical crew that's assigned only to fixed wing or helicopters, or ultimately possibly our own paramedics. We have a system that works that's been very creative for Southern Alberta, and that is the difference between us and STARS. Is out here in rural Alberta, we want our Ford F-150 that can bounce across the prairie, go down into the river valley, and drive through the canals if necessary. We're not looking for the Cadillac that can do all the interfacility transfers and have those additional services that are really important in the core. So I think it represents the same thing that you often have to advocate for, that what we need in rural Alberta is not what we need in the core. Thank you. That is the point of our presentation. Let's see if Dale has anything to add, and we'll take questions.
I think you just about took all the wind out of my sails, which is good, right? That's what you're supposed to do. But we've been working with many of the counties in Southern Alberta, and we feel we've done a really good job of taking care of them, because as much as STARS is an amazing organization, in this area we're better, right? We really truly are. But we work on the idea of saving money. So that's why we talk about the paramedics. Why not, if we had our own paramedics at the call volume we're having now, they would sit, especially in the wintertime, maybe for a week or two and not have to go on a call. So why not have that person in the public system working and only take them out when we need them? It was to be cost effective, right? So and it keeps everybody up to speed and working. That may not be the model going forward, but right now, that's why we have kept our cost at 20 cents on the dollar, is because we make better use of things that we already pay for. Why duplicate? Why replicate what you pay for when in fact it's there for your use? So that's what I have to say. Yeah.
Thank you. Some questions, and I know it was Brian who sort of had lots of thoughts after the HEMS results came out, and we attended a number of their online meetings as well. So take it away, Brian.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for clearing up some of the HEMS misinformation, and appreciate that. It certainly had, myself looking at it through different glasses when you hear some more facts. I guess the thing that I struggle with is, and you alluded to it somewhat as far as rural Albertan, I don't know how we can afford to have the two systems. That's the thing I struggle with. I'm not trying to minimize what Halo's role is. Like, don't get me wrong. I think, and I know paramedics that speak highlier of Halo than they do of STARS. But that said, we don't dispatch. Alberta Health does. and they dispatch stars to our area more often than they do Halo, depending on if they have to go to the regional hospitals for pickups or whatever. So it comes down to budget. It comes down to money and what we can afford. And the one thing I wrote down is you're looking at a night endorsement for your pilots. What's that going to add to your budget? Because you suddenly then you have additional pilots on standby. They have to be, you need more pilots because you can't just have one or two pilots that are able to fill the bill for the night the VFR type work and then not be able to do the night endorsement. So that's one question that I have, and I struggle with some of the same things you do. I'm curious where we go.
Thank you, Councillor. So your first question, I appreciate your position for sure. So I do think as a counter that it would be there's a mistake in not affording both systems, regardless of how dispatch works, and that was one of the recommendations out of the review, was that dispatch actually be returned to Alberta Health. It isn't currently. It's done by STARS at the Emergency Link Centre at Calgary. So having it done by Alberta Health, we actually believe and predict we would see a significant call for service increase immediately. Because, and I will say this 100% publicly, if we were the first and it was my decision, I would send our helicopter every time it was 50-50. Probably most times it was 60-40 for the other guy, and probably sometimes it was 70-30 for the other guy, because the truth is that it's easier to have meetings like this, to advocate provincially and to raise money when the helicopter is in the air. So there's an advantage to being able to dispatch and control who gets to take those missions and what the right call is. So that's one of the recommendations we absolutely agree with in the HEMS review, is that Alberta Health currently dispatches all of the fixed wing planes across the province, so dispatching 5 helicopters should be no additional burden for them to do so properly. So I think that would be a correction in how we would do things. So I think we would see an increased call for service for that, which would help balance the need for more than one service. The other piece that we didn't talk about in our presentation, but it alludes to in your question before I answer your direct questions, is with Transport Canada, if you lose your operator certificate, you lose your entire program. So by having all of our eggs in one basket with one operator, STARS is currently flying the most advanced, newest model of the H145 that exists. Transport Canada did not care that WestJet had billions of dollars of 737 MAXs sitting on the runway in Calgary. Until it was safe to fly, they were never flying it again. And if something happened to the H145 that was unpredictable or undiagnosed, we would lose all 3 bases in Alberta, 2 bases in Saskatchewan, and 1 in Manitoba. So there's a piece to having additional variety in your operators, because there's an aircraft implication and there's also an operator implication. So if you have a Transport Canada issue with your operating certificate, you also have to stop flying that same day. It's like a stop work order from Occupational Health and Safety. To address your direct questions, our costs would not increase at all initially. So our night vision goggle program is intended to provide 14-hour-a-day service, 365 days a year. Currently, on December 25th, we can only fly for 5 or 6 hours when it's VFR during the day. And for those paramedics and firefighters that are on the ground, we want to provide the same knowledge, trust, and understanding that they can rely on Halo for those 14 hours a day, regardless of whether or not it's light or dark out. We would have an operational increase if and when we went 24/7, but that's an evolution of the program we're not currently proposing, although we are prepared to move to a 24/7 operation. 24/7 operations come with a significant jump forward for the Halo program. My job is to paint pictures. That's what I do. Paint pictures so you understand exactly what I'm talking about. The 24/7 is one boulder that is linked to 3 other boulders that are connected by unbreakable chain. And what that means is that when 24/7 boulder sort of goes over the edge, the other 3 follow pretty concurrently behind that, which is likely our own paramedics, night vision goggles, having all of that dealt with, and Saskatchewan. So we're here to talk about how much we can provide to Alberta, but Halo started as an organization that could also provide similar coverage in Southwest Saskatchewan. And so those 4 boulders all go together. I'm I'm not holding them back, but I am certainly not pushing them over either, because life gets extremely complicated with those same things, including financially. However, I would like to say that I have run the numbers, and I can't get a full service program 24/7 a day, 365 days a year with our own paramedics over $6 million a year. Alberta Health is budgeting $14 million per base in Alberta for STARS, and planning to give them, according to the HEMS review, roughly half of that. So, so there's still an efficiency to be found in other programs that do extremely good work. Does that answer your questions?
Very well, thank you.
Yeah.
So are you operating 14/7 now? No, not in the wintertime. So how much, I guess, have you got an idea of what time of year your most calls are from? And is that because of the time of year, or is that because of less hours of operation?
So we follow the same statistics that you would probably get from ground ambulances. You see an increase in rural Alberta at seeding and through harvest. So we are busier in late April, early May through to October. Different types of calls in those other months. We end up with long extrication calls in the winter because it's harder to work in the cold for firefighters, and things just take longer and break easier and all of those pieces. So we might be sitting on scene longer at a call in the winter, but we call volume does drop in the winter for sure. The reason I say there's no operational increase for adding night vision goggles to our program currently is because we base everything today on up to 14 hours a day. So we get a little benefit by having the pilots there for 12 or more in the summer, and we don't pay any extra, and we don't get any credit for them being there a little less in the winter.
Hubie.
So gentlemen, last year I was involved in a fundraising auction in 7 persons. It was a long weekend. So that was one endeavor. And the other endeavor is the herd of cattle raffle. So are there any other fundraising efforts you have besides those 2 that you could list?
So one thing, and we didn't talk about it in the presentation, but it's part of the message to regional councils last year when we didn't know what the future held, was we recognized that we had to diversify our fund model, right? Just like everybody else has to. And so I talked about Halo being purely an event-based organization that had to get people in front of them. And the pandemic did force us to accelerate other fundraising initiatives. So last year we had a very successful cattle or cash. I try to say it with a bit of an accent. Which was our first lottery. We were always planning on having a lottery. The pandemic forced us to launch it sooner than we probably would have, but a lottery that we had planned to run for 7 months sold out in 6 weeks and generated almost 1 month of operating expenses. We brought in a cash calendar lottery, which also sold out and generated quite a bit. And then, as you talked about, we had multiple examples of those online auctions that didn't require people to be in person, or a couple of auctions that were in person but could have appropriate physical distancing and pieces like that. So last year, with no events, we exceeded all fundraising expectations based on the program's entire history. We're now planning to get back to events, but we also have those diversified funding streams that help us provide our part of the funding. The reason that we're advocating for more regional municipality funding from a predictable and stable level, and predictable and stable funding from the provincial government, is that those things provide that assurance that we're always going to be there, and it almost becomes like an underwriting policy. Provincial funding means it's safe for you to invest, you invested means it's safe for them to invest, and if everybody is invested, it's safe for those corporations and those individuals to invest because they know we're always going to be here. So we think we've done a very good job of diversifying our funding streams. We will continue with those. The lottery is coming back next year with an increase. The calendar is already coming back, and we'll continue to expand those abilities as well. But the missing piece, the difference between living month to month and having a bit of a reserve, is increased municipal funding and provincial funding.
Other questions? Kelly, on the TV?
Hi. So what I struggle with, I'll just be straight up, is the confusion at the public level. We're collecting tax dollars. Do ratepayers know that? And is it fair that we collect taxpayer dollars and then they're also being expected or wanting, by choice, to donate and to fund fundraisers? So can you talk to me about that dilemma that I'm having?
I can absolutely try. Thank you for your question. I said to Reeve Douglas before we all started, I said, I'm in more capital P politics than I ever expected to be in my life. So that's been an interesting thing. But I think firstly, to be just as candid, my job isn't to tell you how to provide the funding from a municipal level. My job is to tell you that we need it. So that, I think, would be the first thing. I think people are smart. I think people recognize that they have, if they want these services, that they need to both be funded at a government level as well as individuals that can afford to contribute, whether it's one time or annually, whether it's a fundraiser where it's a direct ask, or whether it's a fundraiser where they have an opportunity to win something like a lottery. We have a very long and proud history in Alberta of having this type of model, this public-private partnership. And the truth is that I agree with council. I think that people want to have these services. They want to have paid on-call firefighters and regional policing and pieces that offer, sense of security and stability in their own communities. And many people, certainly the loud voices, don't want to pay anymore. And you do have to decide. You have to decide if you want those services, and are you prepared to pay, or they have to stop. One of the things that Halo does really well is being really affordable as far as pennies on the dollar is concerned. So I think as a councillor, it gives you the ability to go to your ratepayers, your constituents, and say, we have done our research, we are investing in the organizations that respect our investment in them and your investment as well. So I think that, we absolutely have to be transparent, including at council's level. If you have a way of identifying how you support Halo and STARS, then it should be clear to them that they're doing so. And then that person can make that choice that, okay, I'm doing it on my tax bill, I'm not paying anything over and above that. Some people will decide that for sure, and others won't. And that's the great thing about how we contribute in Alberta. Last year is a great example of an organization that is deeply connected to the community and does not want to be fully provincially funded for that reason, because had we been fully provincially funded and made that cry for help, we would have never survived. But because we had the connection to you and to the other people across Southern Alberta, everybody rallied and said, Halo's not going anywhere on my watch. And so I think you would find you probably have far more support for an affordable, efficient, extremely professional and talented program than you don't.
Okay, I just thank you for that. I appreciate your comments. I do want to make clarity to you that we do not have paid firefighters in our municipality. All our firefighters are volunteers, and we value them greatly. So shout out to all the volunteers.
And really, when you think about it, I tell people that's who we're supporting, are those rural volunteer firefighters or the first responders, because we make them better, we make their job easier. They always, the same comment they always make is when they hear that helicopter coming, the stress level goes down because they know they got help. So really, that's who I feel we are supporting are the first responders in this region because they are volunteers as well.
So I know at one time there was talk of some of the urbans getting more involved with support, and I'm just curious, I didn't see many on your list. Did that actually happen?
So urban, for our perspective, we City of Medicine, not City of Lethbridge. So I think context is important. Firstly, with all due respect to Dale, and I asked him, he said he's probably been about 5 years since he was here with you in this sort of format. We can all write off the COVID year because it wasn't possible, but we relied as a program on the goodness, kind hearts of volunteer boards of directors to come out and do this advocacy and make these kinds of pitches. And HALO has worked so hard to get its foot in the door, as it were. Often we accepted whatever we were given, right? And that's great. And every dollar raised is important. We have to be more realistic about what that model looks like and how sustainable funding actually works for the program. And so they weren't in a great position, A, to be there, and two, to ask those hard questions when they were necessary. So since the evolution of the program has changed over the last 3 years, we do have that ability now to advocate regularly. I believe very, very deeply in relationship over revenue. And so getting to know council and having those conversations, answering the hard questions and in a meaningful way is an important part of this process, and giving you the confidence to speak to your ratepayers and answer those pieces. I give you all of that context because no one on the board had the capacity, ability, connections to go into the City of Medicine Hat and advocate to different councillors, to the mayor and things like that. We are far better at that today. I have personally met with over a dozen council candidates in the last 5 weeks leading up to the Medicine Hat election, including at least 2 mayoral candidates, as well as the city mayor himself. So we are having the conversations, and we are very candidly telling the City of Medicine Hat they have a role to play because, and we use Cypress in that case, but Cypress County invests heavily in services and projects in the city because they know their citizens are going to use the products, those things in Medicine Hat. And so our position with Medicine Hat is you should be investing in services outside of the city as well. So I believe that we do have a door open there that we will continue to pursue. We will now not find an answer until early next year when the new council is elected, and we can revisit with them and present a second time. But I received word from council after presenting to them a year ago that HALO was as close as we had ever gotten to getting predictable and stable funding. I realize those are just words, and that Dale will admit that I always get asked how those meetings go, and I'm like, well, the only real metric is results, so there wasn't any, but we have a confident relationship with many councils across Southern Alberta. So I am confident, Reeve Douglas, that Medicine Hat will be forthcoming. And Lethbridge is the same. It's probably just a little bit further behind. We never used to go to Lethbridge, right? The single engine helicopter left Medicine Hat and 99% of the time came back to Medicine Hat. And so now with the twin, with more capability, ability to land at elevated helipads, ability to fly in higher temperatures and higher winds, we do have the ability to help Lethbridge as well, which is why we met with their emergency services department, and we do have a loose understanding that we are available at their call. So we'll start to provide that same level of evidence to them that we're providing service that warrants ongoing funding, and then we'll have conversations with their council as things move forward as well.
And I'll just add a little bit to that. You know, as a volunteer board, we didn't have the time or the resources to go after the urban side. The rural was the low-hanging fruit, right? And they were the people that we most commonly met with. And so that was the easiest way for us. So that's why we went the way we did. We became very rural, and the rural people took care of us. So it was that's why we did it.
And definitely rural needs you a different way than the urbans do. So I totally understand your approach at that point. Clarence.
So Paul, I'm going to ask you a hypothetical question. There was a clean slate and there was no helicopter service anywhere in the province. and you were the CEO, how would you structure that system?
Just so I'm clear, how would I subsidize it?
No, how would you structure it?
Structure it. Oh, wow. I've never had that question before. I'm so excited, Dale. Excellent question. So I'd like to start with saying that we completely understand why STARS started in Calgary. Political influence, fundraising ability. It was right before the '88 Olympics. It made complete sense. And from a core perspective, based in Edmonton, following that almost made as much sense. If I was starting the program today, and we knew we had a predictable and stable funding model, regardless of whether it was 100% this or 30, 30, 30 that, notwithstanding, I would not put a helicopter in Calgary. I would put one in Medicine Hat and or Lethbridge. I would put one in Red Deer. I would probably put one just north of Edmonton in Spruce Grove or Stony Plain, and I'd put one probably in Fort McMurray or Grand Prairie. It can be done with 5 helicopters. It's a stretch, for sure, but it can be done. But the advantage to having the helicopter located regionally is when you start at the finish line, you are literally the longest and most, and the time period, you use the most fuel and you're the longest time period, because for every mile you fly away from home, you have to fly back. Whereas having the helicopter located regionally allows you to maximize your fuel and your time and still achieve that mission. Believe it or not, Alberta Health has already figured this out. There are no fixed wing planes in Calgary or Edmonton. They fly there and then they fly back out to Lethbridge, Medicine Hat, Grand Prairie, Fort McMurray, all of the regional locations across the province, because they've recognized that leaving the finish line is the most inefficient way of doing things. I wouldn't build it the way it's built today. There's parts that are really good, but there's parts that could use some significant increase in efficiency. I love Dale's model. Dale knows that. Dale knows I think we're going to end up with our own paramedics, and we're already starting to make those preparations, so we're prepared for that when it happens. But Dale's explanation of using established infrastructure makes way more sense. The people we're paying for anyway with our tax dollars, the competency and proficiency of having them in the system, working in hospitals, working with very sick patients all the time, and then doing so in a helicopter environment makes everything better, makes the entire system better. So there are many things that we could do differently. At the moment, and I hope you can understand and respect, that HALO's only focus is predictable and stable funding from the provincial government and from regional municipalities, because unless we're here, we can't make those advocacies for a better system.
That's why, if you look at the map, why can we fly from Medicine Hat to Red Deer and back to Foothills without refueling, when in fact STARS can't get much beyond Highway 3 and have to refuel? And the reason for that is we spend a lot of the time flying toward the hospital rather than directly away from it. We're flying toward it on the way to Red Deer. So in fact, we can go east of Saskatoon and pick some in the 80, 100 kilometers east of Saskatoon and fly back to the Royal in Saskatoon, because we spend more time flying toward the hospital. That's the advantage of pre-locating your helicopters. And it's even more important with helicopters than it is with fixed wing, because we fly about half the speed. And yet they recognized years ago that you go with multiple operators, so that if you lose your operating certificate, you can cover for each other. And by putting the resource out in the periphery and fly it back in, it's way more efficient, right? So that's why, like I said, the Alberta government already does it. They just haven't done it with helicopters yet.
That's political. Well, and not just political in the sense of politics, but organizationally political.
Back to that, do you have any idea of what the Alberta Health Services discussion that will come out of the HEMS review? Like, it's good that they are still talking to you, because as a person reading through that report, you sort of thought by the end that it's not going to be so good. But the fact they're still communicating is good. So what do you figure is going to happen? Any predictions?
Predictions, yeah, great. So positive meetings, I would say for sure. So immediately following the release of the HEMS review, we were contacted by the minister's office and indicated that, you know, they were just recommendations and that dialogue would continue, including, if you remember, the actual press release from the minister's office was, we have the review now, we're reviewing the recommendations and we'll engage with our stakeholders over that. That's not just us, that's Hero in the North, STARS for sure, and yourselves, right? You're all stakeholders in how this program ultimately looks. So I did travel to Edmonton 3 weeks ago and had a 3 or 4 hour meeting with Alberta Health, not Alberta Health Services, but with Alberta Health, the key person in charge of air ambulance across the province, shared our concerns about the review, shared the mistakes that we've highlighted with yourselves, and had a really good conversation around sole source contracting and the impact on operational certificates from Transport Canada, plus our efficiencies and our willingness to expand the program and you know, those kinds of pieces as well. That meeting is meant to be follow-up, and I expect that that meeting will happen in the coming weeks. It may even happen in Medicine Hat. We did invite them to come and see the program and meet in Medicine Hat so that we can have a dialogue down here in our own environment and have them, you know, with the helicopter understand who we are and all of those pieces as well. I think that will be the next real telltale position, is to get a sense of where those things are. Again, immediately following that meeting, the board asked, Paul, how did it go? And my response to really good, great dialogue, felt heard for sure, but there were no results. So if we measure everything by results, I have nothing to tell you. But we know that these things take time, right? And we're prepared to put the effort in. The last piece I think I would say about that specifically is, we know that Alberta Health was working off a 3-year implementation from the time that the HEMS review was adopted, which it isn't currently because those conversations continue. So even after the final recommendations are made and the implementation process starts, we're still looking at 36 months where HALO will continue to provide service to Southern Alberta. Again, we're not going anywhere. I talk about it, it may seem precarious to the council, but we come from an organization that literally was month to month for the first 12 years of our existence. We are only just getting to about a point where we can predict that we'll be here in 10 months. Doesn't seem like a lot, but to us it seems like a massive leap forward. So we are not going anywhere. We will continue to provide exceptional service to Southern Alberta. And I realize that this is a public council meeting, but with all due respect, there's a provincial election before 36 months is up, and the advocacy won't stop. So we will continue to advocate for a program we deeply believe in, and a program that delivers on everything that we say we do.
And the one comment we made to Minister Chandra and to other people is that we wouldn't engage with the media, right? As long as there's meaningful discussion going on, we're happy with that. So there's no use playing the political game unless we can see that this is going to end well. That's why you haven't heard much from us, is because that was the agreement, is we won't talk about it, right?
And that pretty much is how you guys have always behaved, I think. I think you've been respectful and respectable, so it's served you well. Yeah, absolutely. Just something to help me understand better. When you talk about your paramedics, so they're within the health system now doing their usual stuff they do, and also they're working for you and other as well, correct? So when you talk about changes, like it sounded like at one time you mentioned here possibility of your own, so that would be quite different and expensive.
So our current model has been a model that was born in the Palliser Health region. When we first began, we had a relationship with Palliser Health and used their paramedics with the helicopter. That evolved into Alberta Health Services when Alberta Health created the corporation and began providing both Alberta Health Services and EMS across the province. And so all of the Palliser Health Region paramedics became AHS employees, and the relationship between HALO and AHS continued. But we use on-duty paramedics from the hospital currently. So instead of going by ground, they respond in an ambulance to the airport and go with us. Most missions have significant pre-alert time from the time 911 call comes in and whether a helicopter is warranted gets answered. They have lots of time to get to the hangar and get in the aircraft and be prepared to fly as soon as they're dispatched. There are a couple of contingencies with that are important. One is, again, in the original days, 99% of our missions originated back in Medicine Hat. So we were taking the same crew that would go by ground out by air and bringing them back to where they would end up by ground. With the twin-engine helicopter, we do have the ability to go to Lethbridge, Calgary, and all across southern Alberta. And so we are taking a paramedic out of the system, although they'll be gone less than if they went by ground to Calgary, or even if they went by fixed wing to Calgary. We are taking them out longer than popping out to those call volumes within their response region. A Medicine Hat paramedic might respond to the Elkwater Ski Hill on any given day of the year, but they're not likely responding to Milk River. Whereas with the helicopter they can. So we do acknowledge that we have that support for sure. There are several limitations to the program that have us discussing our own paramedics. One, we were told that they currently will not be allowed to fly with us at night. So that's a limitation we're not satisfied with and have to have contingencies in place to make sure that we can continue to provide the high level of care that we want to provide. And by having our own paramedics, we would be able to do that. 24/7 operations has always been a bit of a hurdle because even in Medicine Hat, they go down to a reduced number of crews overnight. And so then if we take a crew out of that, they're already reduced. So there are several advantages to having our own paramedics. And the final piece is, as I'm sure you've been discussing, I know Vulcan County recently formed a community action group to make sure their ambulances stay in their county and not get stuck in Calgary when they get on a patient transfer. The other final advantage to our own paramedics is we supplement the system, not detract from it. So instead of taking a paramedic that's paid and on duty, our paramedics work for us, and we're taking them to a call that may be out of that response area. So there is a significant budget implication for sure. There's a recruiting implication, but Halo is no longer reactive. We have to be able to anticipate those eventualities and have at least a position in place and certainly a plan if it ends up falling on our shoulders.
Thank you.
And the one thing I wanted to add to that is, it's my feeling, I'm from the old school, right? I'm from where we try to use resources that we already pay for. I'm saying is that the cost savings of using a Halo model type program, that the extra dollars that are saved can be used to put an extra crew into Medicine Hat or an extra crew into Lethbridge, so that they would never get into that code red situation, whether they're serving us or not. So I feel that there's such a significant cost saving in using our model that we can make the system better in all regards, the public system better. So I don't know if I'm explaining myself very well, but right now, the HIMSS review said, what, $43.7 million to run 3 bases? Doesn't cost Halo anywhere near that, to run those bases. So we're saying there's significant cost savings that can be had that would supplement the public system, or the public system is the wrong term, but the current hospital system.
Which is why our municipal lobbying, I don't think, can ever end, because that's something that they need to look at. Brian.
I wanted to switch back to your the urban funding that you talked about with your Medicine Hat and Lethbridge, and I guess to encourage you to reach out to those smaller communities too, whether it's Tabor or Brooks or even the smaller communities, because I mean truly they benefit. They use the service. I don't want to use benefit, because anytime you guys are active, it's not, I don't look at it as something that's usually positive, right? I mean, positive and hopefully they save a life, but because those people, they work in the counties. It doesn't matter which county we're talking about. Those people in those smaller communities, they work in our farms, they do their recreation, and unfortunately accidents happen in those places too. So I don't think it's unfair to go to the urban partners and say, hey, you need to be part of this equation too. Yeah, thank you.
They're on our roads. I mean, that's where a lot of things happen. So yeah, absolutely. Okay. This has been good. Any other questions? Go ahead, Dale.
Answering to that a little bit, you know, as a farmer, and I live along the river, I'm seeing more and more people on mountain bikes, quads, all those sort of things, all those dangerous activities. They're all urban people who are using the rural venue for recreation. And so what we're actually doing is increasing the need for helicopter service, because they're in areas that you can't get to with a ground ambulance, right? So that's why having a good stable program is probably a really good thing. So in fairness, we are going after, that's the whole term, go ahead. We are cooperating with all the small centers, and you know, the Brookses, the Tabors has been a great supporter. So the smaller urban centers understand how important the program is.
It's good for those people that are buying all that fancy stuff and using it out in the country to figure out that the doctors just aren't hanging around every bush too to save them. All right. You talked about answering questions in a meaningful way being important, and I think you guys do that really well. I have to compliment you on your ability to explain what it is, what your mission is, and how important HALO is to our communities. So thank you again for coming. And most of us around this table are not going to be returning, so you're going to have to come back faster than you thought. That's probably the case in quite a few communities, I would think, in your area. So he is he? I'm not surprised to hear that. Tell him I'm not. Okay. Anything else, guys, for folks around the table before you head off? Yes, thank you. Thank you for the work you do and for your passion and for your reasonableness. Everything you guys try to do to me is just so rational, and I hope the government and their wisdom and the health people can see that when they meet with you. You're not asking for the moon at all. So. And I can't believe that you guys and your volunteers continue to wage war. You're amazing. Just on and on, because there's always something coming up.
It's a real challenge, you know, but we have about 4 or 5 solid base board members who just, they're obstinate people. we know this is the right thing to do, and we're not going to give up. And I guess that's what's driving us.
And anytime they question that, I tell them they're not allowed to. So we're good. We're good for sure. I would just like to say thank you, Reeve Douglas Council, and to the people that aren't running. Thank you for your service. I mean, I know it's a thankless job. Again, more than I probably ever planned to know before I got into this gig. But I appreciate your efforts and your willingness to stand up and lead. In addition to continue to advocate for additional funding, both from the County of Newell and the rest of the organizations that we serve, we need that same political advocacy on top of the financial contribution that you make every year. And so, having your voice alongside ours is very important. And so we thank you for the voice before today, and we look forward to that continued partnership going on beyond that as well. We can't express our gratitude enough, ever. Thank you is never enough. But we're trying to get to a point where we can say it more often and more to your individually and in those conversations that we see each other at different events and things like that. So from us to you, thank you for your leadership and your ongoing commitment. And thank you for the opportunity to be here. So we appreciate all of that. I'll leave some business cards. They've got my cell on it. I tend to be sort of a 24/7 guy. So if you have any questions, feel free to call or email or text anytime, and we're happy to answer, meets, whatever you need. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Safe travels. Is it a smoky day out there again? Keeping the temperature down? Keeping the temperature down a bit? Yeah. Yeah, it's been quite the growing season. Huh, of course, makes sense. Interesting. You betcha. Bye-bye. Okay. Our first page is done. Um, are we moving, where are we gonna go? Yeah, they're here, good. All right, we're back to 8.1 and the land use bylaw.
So my question is, we're only going to do second reading. Why do we even do second reading? Can we just table it? It might not hurt them politically.
Okay, we'll resume our discussion and on the bylaws. We're at the second reading of our land use bylaw, and I'm going to defer to Jeff and Matt for some understanding of what the 2-week thing means to us and what would be good to have a look at. Let's listen to our staff for a moment here, guys, please.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so that was quite a long public hearing, the longest public hearing I've been involved in, but I really wanted to make sure during that public hearing I went through all the concerns, because like I say, we don't want to minimize any concerns at all. We really want to address them, bring them to the forefront and discuss them and solve them, really. And you know, honestly, we really truly think that we have solved all of the concerns that have been presented. There are a few concerns outlined still in the letter received from the Village of Dutchess that, you know, we haven't had the opportunity to consider amending the bylaw to present a copy with those amended changes because we haven't heard them until late last week. Which again is very contrary to the process that's prescribed in our intermunicipal development plan. And you know, we've talked a lot about IDPs and the use of IDPs and what we think, what we know IDPs are meant to do and the direction we want to take them in the future. And you know, that process and Mayor Steidl talked about timelines and not enough time, but all those timelines are prescribed in that process within that document that we have both adopted as a bylaw, and we followed those and done that to the best of our ability. Based on the discussion and the comments from the city of Brooks and the Village of Dutchess, it sounds to me like the Village of Rosemary is happy with what we've done and the changes that we've made, but I think it would likely be responsible to table the additional readings of the bylaw at the very least until next meeting. Both organizations said they would endeavor to get sat down and consider the changes within the next 2-week period, and I really hope we can sit down as administration and go through them. And the point that we're at now is that we're having a hard time unpacking their concerns with the removal of the fringe district, and in our opinion, we've satisfied their concerns, just not with the use of the fringe district in our land use bylaw, because we don't want that interconnectivity. We don't want to reference land use bylaw numbers in our intermunicipal development plans because they'll be referencing land use bylaws that have been rescinded years ago, unless we go back and amend those plans at the same time. So I would recommend that we do table the readings for you know, follow-up discussion with city and village administration and see where we can go from there. It is disappointing to see the timelines and read some of these things when, you know, myself, Maria, Shanley, Pam, the steering committee, we've been at this for a long time, for 9 months now, you know, since January. So it's a bit deflating at the 11th hour that there are all these considerations. I mean, June 23rd, when that notification for the public engagement was sent out, it was a long time ago, and there was a lot of time to review that document between June 23rd and September 1st when we received that letter. So I don't have much sympathy for not adhering to the process. And if the process is what's broken, I think we need to address that and amend the process and allow ample time for what is needed to be considered. I don't know if Maria has anything else or Matt on that, but I would recommend we table the readings for 2 weeks.
Having not been involved with the committee work on rewriting the land use bylaw, I just want to congratulate staff and the committee members for getting that document down to something that a new CAO can read through and understand. Because it's a pretty thick. When I tried to read through the 250-page document, it's a head spin, right? And that's for a guy who lives and breathes municipal government. So I don't know how any developer could pick up that land use bylaw and know where they're supposed to start. So I think we've done a great service to the community, getting a land use bylaw drafted that is manageable, and then pulling out the subdivision bylaw so you can have a one-stop shop for these things. I think it's great. I understand the frustration with the timelines, but I think, you know, throwing a bone to our partners and sitting down and listening, it's part of what we do in municipal government. We listen, we give them some leash. I did have to point out specifically that we have asked. I mean, the reason we met with Rosemary and Brooks in an IDP meeting is because they accepted the invite, right? So that was extended, and I commend staff for putting forth the efforts to engage. And you can't control when the responses come, but it's a big enough piece of what we do that we need to work with our partners and make sure that we have spent the time with them to explain how things are going to work moving forward. And I think Jeff did a great job the way he wrote his RFD with the issues and the potential solutions. You know, next steps are we just sit down with those partners and read through it with them once more, and potentially even with an updated draft of their individual IDPs to get those minor edits sorted out so that they know we're not trying to pull a fast one on them. I think we're all really interested in cutting the red tape, which Jeff said multiple times, and having an efficient process. Like, we're doing things which are ridiculous. It's just a spend of administrative time for actions that really don't amount to anything at the end of the day. And I think those were all the things that we were really excited to cut out, because we just want to get to a reasonable place in the world. Let's still have all the controls and do the consult where it's necessary. But if we're just rubber stamping thing, like that's not a job anybody wants. It's not fulfilling, and it frustrates anybody who's trying to get a project done. We know how frustrated we are waiting for ministerial approval on a grant project. I imagine it's the same thing for anybody who's willing to spend money in our region to build, whether it's an ag barn or a go-kart track, whatever they want. Like, these are good things. We want development in our region, and I think the land use bylaw edits go a long way to facilitating that. So congratulations to staff and committee for getting that done.
Totally agree. A new CAO and an old Reeve. Understanding this better than ever is so important, and that was part of the reason that we went out on our own to do our own thing, and it was to get rid of regulation. And hopefully meaningless regulation, I should mention, not the stuff that's meaningful. And if we can have our partner municipalities realize that, it's good for them too, for goodness sakes. So if 2 weeks makes a difference, excellent. Anne-Marie?
Thank you to Jeff and Brian for doing the presentation. I think a lot of the confusing part of today was the IDP and the link to the land use bylaw, and maybe that was misunderstood. And what was not mentioned today is that a land use bylaw is a living document. You guys, staff keeps track of what works, what doesn't work, and if you have to change it in a year or two, then that's what you do. So I think we have a good one.
And that's fine if it is only for a month or two. Like we said, it's a living document. It's not something that's Fred Flintstone in the cave etched in the wall forever. So, all right. Can we get a motion then to act on this recommendation of, I'm looking up to see if I'm missing anybody up in the sky there. Brian?
I was just going to make a motion to table
Okay.
for 2 weeks.
Next meeting? Yeah. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried, and our thanks again to P&D staff for your work. Amazing.
Thanks all. We'll see you in 2 weeks with hopefully some second and third reading.
Sounds good. Clarence?
I guess just one caution, and that's most, I guess most Matt can compare. Let's make sure that in 2 weeks we have what we need and not a day after.
Yeah, we're going to be pretty hot right after this meeting, getting dates and times lined up. I know we'll make 24/7 work on our side of things, so it's not going to be, won't be here.
You guys, no, it hasn't yet. Carry on as always. Okay, that takes us, I believe, through page 2 and to the pathway, 13.1, I believe.
Okay, I will take this one away. So Joint Shared Services Committee approved its pathway committee's attached budget. You've got there to construct just over 12 kilometers of pathway from our building here down to the Marshall Trail pathway at Kinbrook Island Park. That total budget estimate that was presented was just under $3 million. Determining funding sources is the next step for moving the project forward, if it's going to move forward, if there's funding sources out there. County Council previously approved submitting that application under the municipal stimulus program to get the first 2.4 kilometers complete. I've contacted the grant advisor up there, and he assures me we'll know as soon as they know when that's approved. So I told him, you know, we're quickly running out of construction season. We'd like to get digging. So if you can, anything you can do to expedite that will be great. So that 544 is there. The City of Brooks in here, I said they'll be entertaining that recommendation. They did approve that $700,000 request to come to the county to fund from the remaining 2017 regional enhancement grant allocation. They had just over 970,000 left that they can apply to County Council to approve for projects which have a regional benefit. In my conversation with the CAO at the City of Brooks, I suggested, well, we'll match, or we'll at least put the recommendation in front of council to match their dollars to see if this project has life or support around our council table. So that recommendation's there for $700,000 to come from us. And then with those dollar amounts in place, it gives the Pathway Committee an understanding of what they're looking for in terms of sponsorships or other grants to solicit from the community. And they'd be looking for just over $1 million to come from sponsors and other grants, maybe 1.5 if we don't get approved on the municipal stimulus grant dollars. So a few options in front of council there. The City of Brooks, although they made the motion to put the application in, it's still in County Council council's hands to approve that. So option one, we could approve the City of Brooks' commitment of up to $700,000 from the Regional Enhancement Fund and match it with our commitment of $700,000 toward the construction of that pathway to Kinbrook Island, funded from our Recreation Fund. Option two, don't approve it and don't approve the city's request or allocate any additional funds, or, you know, an option 3, 4, and 5 could be any iteration that council is comfortable with. So we've got that in front of you for your consideration to kick around.
Flies even in here. Matt, I've never in the past felt that we did a lot more than rubber stamp those asks for the regional enhancement money, correct? I mean, we didn't argue with we put it in the bank and they made their application to us, and so to me, if that's what they want to spend it on, that's their decision. Brian.
Oh, so I guess my thoughts were along the same lines, and I think what even makes it more encouraging for me is it's actually a project that's going to happen outside the city. And not that I'm against something that they determines inside the city, but this is almost getting 50-cent dollars. And I know they're all our money. It's all our money anyways, but they do have the ability to spend it where they want.
Oh, that's good.
And so truly it's checks off another box for me. I guess the one question that I struggle with is why does it have to be a paved pathway? I don't get that.
So you can hop on your rollerblades or your skateboard and make it from here down to Kinbrook. And I don't think it necessarily does have to be a paved pathway. And I think, you know, with the preliminary budget estimate that we've got prepared, depending where fundraising shakes out, maybe there's going to need to be some stretches that remain unpaved, right? I also had it in the RFD here. I know there's been some comments from the hamlet of Lake Newell that they'd maybe like pathways out there, and that might be a good phase 2. And we've got the recreation facility funding policy in place that, you know, by all means, we could have that meeting with the hamlet advisory out there if they wanted to do a local improvement and take the pathway out there. But yeah, I don't think there is anything that says it has to be paved the entire way.
Thank you for that. I just, you know, I do lots of walking, and I've walked in places that, well, Councilor Amalong and I went for a walk in his second house area, and it was all gravel pathways, and it's wonderful. And so I guess I have no problem if the pavement goes to our original thought with the grant, but beyond that, I really think that it does sort of cater to that native prairie too, rather than having a strip of pavement through it. So, and truly, like, I look at it from a logical point of view. You take the topsoil, you take the sod off, put some gravel on, and our ASB department sprays it maybe twice a year with Roundup, and you don't have weeds, and people run and bike, and anyways.
Well, Brian, I'm of another opinion. I think it's imperative that we put pavement on it. If you don't want pavement, you can go walk out there right now. Just carry it right on, right off this driveway or this parking lot. You can walk all the way to the lake. But that's not the idea of this. This is to provide a path that anybody can use with whatever type of, whether it's rollerblades or whatever it is. I do believe that, in my opinion, I would be very much in favor of pavement. I do, and if we're going to do it, let's do it right. Yeah, exactly.
Tracy's next.
I have a couple questions on this. First of all, what can you
Please, can you talk louder if possible?
Okay. With that, could somebody explain what the regional enhancement money is? I've forgotten about that. And why is it like, how is it that the city can apply to us for it? And then also my second question is, if we ended up that we could get Lake Newell Resort in on their pathway, because originally that was the original pathway that we started with, or one of them. And then because we gained no traction with landowner support, it didn't get anywhere. If we get Lake Newell Resort on side with their pathway, which I know that they would like, can they apply to the recreation fund as well for some funding? Like, because today we're looking at possibly putting in money from our recreation fund to go towards the regional pathway. I know, could you hear me?
Yes, we got something going here that we can hear you guys better now, which is great. Tracy, I'll let Matt talk about the recreation or the regional enhancement. It's old money that's been sitting there.
Yeah, so the dollars in the regional enhancement fund, that's remnants of our old revenue sharing agreement that we had with the municipalities in the region. 2017 was the last year that we allocated dollars to our partners to use towards projects that had a regional benefit and I'm pretty sure the city of Brooks in 2017, we had allocated just over $1 million to them. They've used some of those dollars for the daycare expansion at the JBS Canada Center. They've also got $850,000 coming out of there for, the Hort Main line expansion, and then the balance, which is left, 973. They're looking at using 700,000 of that towards this pathway. So I guess my original 1.0 doesn't work. It must have been a lot higher than that.
Yeah, well, I think what Tracy meant to say is if the county uses 700,000 from our recreation fund as our share to go to Kinbrook, can Lake Newell Resort also apply to that recreation fund to get their part?
Yeah, great. Thanks for reminding me about that second part to the question. So I think we really need to separate the regional pathway concept. So that's really building a tourist asset, I think, is how that Economic Recovery Task Force was looking at connecting the provincial park with the city and the potential of doing pathways in Lake Newell. I mean, Lake Newell Resort, that hamlet could petition the county at any time for that local improvement to take those pathways through. The recent recreation facility funding agreement we put in place for new infrastructure, if they want to make the argument that it's a recreation pathway, it would look at the community being on the hook for 75% and the county would be on the hook for 25%. So that would, the recreation fund could be one of the funds that the county would fund their 25% out of, yes. But I think, if we're going to mobilize and do this path down to Kinbrook, it might be a good time to engage that community again to see if there's any support for them taking it through the resort.
Lionel?
Does anybody know how much further it is to go to Lake Newell Resort? Do you have those numbers?
No, I don't, because the pathway that the committee's got laid out, hits Township Road 18-2, goes in a quarter section and then down, so you still have a ways to go to get to the resort before you're in the community itself, right?
All right. Ellen, Tracy?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me? Should I speak louder?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I do think I like the Lake Newell Resort concept. Obviously, that would be recreational in the county, by a hamlet in the county. So this is why we have the recreational fund. Now, with the regional pathway, close to $3 million, I have a bit of a problem using our recreational fund for that. Again, $700,000 that is being provided by the city, really, we shared with them years ago. So does the city, our friends at the city, do they have enough skin in the game? Basically, we're then already, in addition to the $700,000 matching from a regional recreational fund, we're also going to put in over $500,000 from our, what is it called? The stimulus grant, I suppose. And then I think it's going to be hugely enjoyed by the urban friends from Brooks. I think more so than our local people that have paid into the regional fund, the recreational fund. So I would certainly like to see our friends at the city have some more skin in the game. Thank you.
Well, I think in the past we have not, the regional enhancement fund that they are using was, we had no strings attached. So we can't start thinking that that is something to do with us. That was what we did. So that is their skin in the game. And that's, we said they could use it how they wanted. And as Brian points out, it's much more regional this way than if it was something completely in the city. From my perspective anyhow. And when we take a look, it doesn't pay for the whole project. There's still lots of, sponsors and other grants, and I know that there is a number of interested parties will be contributing, and I would predict they're probably located in the city. So I think the city in the end is going to have a fair amount of skin in the game, personally.
May I respectfully disagree with that? I wasn't disagreeing with the fact that, of course, they can spend it wherever they want to, and which is wonderful. But I still think it's way short. Obviously, the county is putting in significantly more money for our urbans to use our recreation. And that was actually my point.
Wayne?
What happens if we don't get that stimulating funds? What if it's not approved? That's $500,000 that we won't get. Now we're sitting here, how long have we waiting now for what, a month? And we haven't got an answer yet, so what happens to this project if we don't have that $500,000?
Well, if you don't get that $500,000 from the province of Alberta, I guess you're either going to have a conversation with the city of Brooks, County of Newell, or the Pathway Committee will have a bigger job to do on the fundraising side of things. Or you have a stretch of it that's packed real nice, like they've got down at Dinosaur Park or in Canmore. There's options, right? Depending on constraints. So, you know, this really, this request here and what the city approved on the 7th is really to just, is there life in the project? Once we know what the commitments are at the municipal level, you've got a clear picture in the community where you can promote a project that once we get the fundraising done, we'll get the shovels in the ground and build this pathway for you. And if there's no appetite at the community level to fundraise $1 million, then, you know, it might not be time for the project. And that's all right. It's an idea. I think it's a great idea that the Economic Recovery Task Force put in front of both councils. And now it's really up to council to decide whether you want it to live or to die. Well, and I don't know that that's the right phrasing, right? There's still an opportunity for fundraising on it.
Other questions or other thoughts? Tracy?
Yeah, I guess Matt sort of summed up what I was going to say is like, you know, it's a starting point. We have a committee put together now that is looking to start getting some of these pathways in our area started. And this gives it a push. You know, we can go down the road now knowing that, okay, this is where we're going, what we're going to do, and see what we can come up with. As far as I wanted to make the comment on the paving though as well is that paving the pathway in the long run will probably be less maintenance. And with gravel, like you're going to have to go back and re-gravel over time and stuff. And we just want to do it right and just get it done at once. And again, down with the fundraising, all that can be changed too. Like if we find out we don't have enough money to pave it, then we'll look at options. But I think right now the big concept is, do we want to look at this as a regional project? Do we want to get this started and see where it can go? Because it always starts with an idea. And that's where we're at right now.
Thanks, Tracy. Ellen?
Yeah, I wonder if there could be another option that we approve the $700,000 from the Regional Enhancement Fund as a contribution by the City of Brooks, and that we contribute the money that is coming from the stimulus grants as our portion, and not just match it. That would be my recommendation.
Is that a motion?
Absolutely.
Okay. So what you're saying is your motion would be, is if we get the money from the provincial government, that we put that in as our contribution only.
Yes, that would be my motion. And also, of course, to approve the city's commitment of the $700,000 from the Regional Enhancement Fund.
Okay. Anne-Marie?
Just to add to the conversation, if we can have a group that fundraises $1 million, I think that is pretty amazing to overall enhancement of our region, to have a pathway all the way to Kinbrook. It's just so nice for the area. It's good for tourism. If they can come up with 100 or with a million, I am in favor of doing the 700,000 from our recreation fund, because that's what the money is for. And then the 544, that's provincial money. That is not really our share.
Okay. I'll call the question, I think. All in favor of the motion? That's right. That's what we're voting on right now. Anyone or all in favor? Opposed? Okay, that motion is defeated, so does someone else want to put a motion forward? Tracy, your hand is up. I don't know if that's why it's up.
Oh, do I still have it on raise hand? Oh, no, yes, I did. I would like to make the motion that we support the request from the City of Brooks for the $700,000 for the Regional Enhancement Fund, and that the county contributes the $700,000 from the Recreation Fund. And I don't know if this needs to be part of the motion, but also to engage Lake Newell Resort in conversation on a pathway for their hamlet. And maybe that doesn't have to be part of the motion, but just on record for that.
Should we do it separate? Can we do it? Can we talk about that in addition rather than put it all together, Trace? Well, you said that. It's fine if we talk about it after this motion. Yeah.
Sure.
It's
Yeah,
option
that'd be
one,
fine.
basically. Option one, basically, as written down there then in our RDF or RFD. Yes. You bet. Wayne.
This 700,000 that we're gonna be voting on in a few minutes, is that approved if the fundraise sponsors and grants come across with $2 million? Does it then proceed into the process?
Well, I guess it won't move until the money, well, maybe part of it would be built, I guess. I'm not sure how that would go, Matt.
Yeah, I think the conversations that, and Mark could probably speak to it better, that we've had with our partners, the landowners there, they support the project, they just don't want the project to end in the middle of nowhere, right? So if we're gonna do the path, we need to make sure we can get the pathway all the way there, or that we end at a logical place. They don't, you know, that's the one request we've had, kind of a thing. So I think, you know, there's still, the fundraising amount needs to come, and we need to see where the community support is, and that'll determine whether it's paved and how far and if, kind of a thing, right? Projects really, I know a lot of work's been done to route the path and get the cooperation of landowners. This is not a new concept in our area at all. It's pretty exciting if you can see a project of this scope get off the ground, and I think it really will be a pretty cool recreation asset that you'll have in your community that links that campground, which is just overflowing during camp season, and open up some opportunities for recreation for your local people as well.
So the answer would be yes, Wayne. All right, so anything else? Okay, I'll ask for your vote on that option as a motion. Proposed by Tracy or put forward by Tracy, option one. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. And further to Tracy's comments and other comments, I think discussion could be entered into with Lake Newell Resort and at this point in time to see how they would like to get involved. Remember, this particular project has become more of an EID engagement. Without them, I don't know if this would have moved forward. So the Lake Newell Resort, Trace, I hope I'm saying this appropriately or correctly, the Lake Newell Resort is sort of a different item, correct?
Yes.
It's similar, but a separate thing from this first thing we're talking about.
Right. Yeah, it's the Lake Newell Resort Pathway would be a different project from this one that we're talking about. And you're right, without the EID supporting this project, that was where the traction was lost with the resort, because they are, again, one of the major landowners. To get that pathway to the resort is to cross EID land. And so now the EID is looking more favorably at this project to Kinbrook. So who knows, it'll have to go back to discussion. And, you know, we'll have to engage the Hamlet Advisory Committee at the resort and see what we can come up with.
We'll get rid of our cars and get horses.
We can't hear you. Somebody, is
Yeah.
that you talking, Molly?
Yes, I just said we're moving on to information items. And then, oh, information item, by the way, there's a Dam Fest, it's called, in Bazano this weekend. It's one of Alberta's cultural events that's received funding, and the lady that's very involved in it asked me to send out an email, and so all of you have the schedule, if any of you are interested in attending anything. And other than that, if there's nothing else, we need a motion to move in camera. Lionel will move us. All in favor? Opposed? We're in. All right, Hubie has made a motion to move us out of camera. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried, and so our meeting will adjourn at 3:50. 3:50. Thank you, everyone.